My name is Angelina Baez, and 3 months ago, while I was unconscious fighting for my life after heart surgery, my son, Clifford, stole everything I had worked 40 years to build. $3.19 million. The beach house I'd saved decades to buy, sold. My vintage car collection, liquidated. All gone while I was too weak to protect what was mine. But Clifford made one crucial mistake. He was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. For 8 weeks, I'd been gathering evidence. Security footage showing me unconscious during the supposed signings, medical records proving my mental state, bank statements tracking every stolen dollar, phone recordings of Clifford bragging about his newfound wealth. Before I continue with what happened next, make sure you subscribe to hear how this confrontation ended. Trust me, you won't want to miss what I had planned for Clifford. And let me ask you this. If someone stole from you while you were fighting for your life, how far would you go to get justice? Let me know in the comments below. Let me tell you about the woman I used to be. 40 years ago, I was Angelina Albert, a broke single mom working as a secretary at a real estate office in Newport Beach. My husband Franklin had just died of brain cancer when Clifford was 5, leaving us with crushing medical bills and nothing else. I remember sitting in our cramped apartment with eviction notices on the table, watching my son eat cereal for dinner because it was all I could afford. I had 2 choices: give up or fight like hell. I chose to fight. I started at the bottom, filing papers, making coffee for agents who treated me like furniture. But I was watching, learning, studying every deal they made. At night, after putting Clifford to bed, I studied for my real estate license by lamplight until my eyes burned. When I passed the exam, my boss laughed. "Angelina, honey, you're great at organizing files, but selling houses, that takes a special kind of person." He was right. It took someone who understood losing everything and fighting to rebuild. My first sale was to a young widow like me. Every other agent had turned her away. When she signed those papers, tears streamed down her face. I never thought I'd afford my own place again. That moment changed everything. For 20 years, I built Wilson Coastal Properties, helping people others had written off: divorced women, immigrants, buyers with bad credit. The fancy agents called us Wilson's charity cases. But those charity cases referred everyone they knew. By 2010, we were Orange County's largest independent real estate firm. The agents who'd mocked me were begging to work for the company I'd built from nothing. But success came with a price I never expected. The more I built, the more I realized I was creating something that could either lift my son up or destroy him completely. As my business grew, so did my investments. In 2005, I bought the beach house, my first luxury purchase. Walking through that empty Malibu cottage, I thought about how far I'd come from eating cereal for dinner in our cramped apartment. This was mine. I had earned it. Then came the vintage car collection. A 1967 Mustang, classic Corvette, pristine Porsche 911. I'd always been fascinated by cars, maybe because we'd never been able to afford anything decent when Clifford was young. But here's where I made the biggest mistake of my life. Clifford grew up thinking these were his father's assets, not mine. I never corrected him because I thought I was honoring Franklin's memory. When little Clifford would ask about the cars, instead of telling him I'd worked 18-hour days to afford them, I'd say, "Daddy would have loved this car." At the beach house, I'd whisper, "Your father always dreamed of living by the ocean." I thought I was being generous. I didn't realize I was planting seeds that would grow into lies that would destroy our relationship. When Clifford graduated college, I offered him a job at Wilson Coastal. His response crushed me. "Mom, I'm not working for some small-time real estate office. I've got bigger plans." Those plans were day trading, cryptocurrency schemes, and failed ventures I quietly bailed him out of. He married Rachel, then divorced her for Jessica, a woman impressed by his stories about his inheritance from his father. The gambling addiction followed. Every desperate call ended the same way. "I just need to hold on until I get my inheritance. Dad left me enough to cover everything, right?" I never found the courage to tell him the truth, that his father died broke, that every asset he thought he'd inherit was built by my sacrifice. I thought I was protecting him. Instead, I was feeding a delusion that would turn him into a thief. The heart attack hit me in my office on a Tuesday morning. One minute I was reviewing contracts, the next, I was on the floor clutching my chest as pain shot down my arm. My assistant Vera screamed for an ambulance, while I thought this was it. This was how Angelina Baez would die. At the hospital, doctors delivered devastating news. It was massive, the kind that kills most people my age. I needed immediate triple bypass surgery with less than 30% survival rate. That's when Clifford arrived, crying as he rushed to my bedside. "Mom, you can't leave me. You're all I have." Through the morphine haze, I felt something I hadn't in years. My son genuinely needed me. "Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm gonna fight for you." Before surgery, Clifford appeared with documents. "Mom, just in case something happens, we need to make sure I can handle your affairs. Medical decisions, paying bills." The lawyer said it's standard. My hands shook uncontrollably. The anesthesia was making me drowsy, and the papers looked blurry. I should have read them. But all I could see was my son's face, filled with what looked like genuine concern. I signed everything without reading a single word. The last thing I remember was Clifford kissing my forehead. "Don't worry about anything, Mom. I'll take care of everything. And don't worry about me either. I know Dad left me enough to get by if something happens." Even drugged, those words should have been a red flag. But I was too scared, too vulnerable, trusting the one person who was about to destroy everything I'd built. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, because what happens next will shock you. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you signed important papers without reading them? Tell me in the comments. I went into surgery thinking I was protecting my son's future. I had no idea I was signing away my own. I was unconscious for 6 days. 6 entire days, where I existed in a gray void between life and death, while machines kept my heart beating and my lungs breathing. When I finally opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was Clifford's face hovering over me, tears streaming down his cheeks. Jessica stood beside him, both of them looking exhausted but relieved. "Thank God," he whispered, grabbing my hand. "We thought we'd lost you, Mom. The doctor said it was touch and go for days." For a moment, lying there weak and disoriented, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. My son had stayed by my bedside. My son had been worried about losing me. Over the next few weeks in the hospital, Clifford was the perfect son. He brought me fresh flowers every other day, my favorite white roses. He helped me with physical therapy, encouraging me to take those painful first steps down the hospital corridor. He made sure I had everything I needed, from extra blankets to my favorite magazines. He even brought me homemade soup that Jessica had prepared. But something felt off. Even through the fog of pain medication, I noticed things that didn't quite add up. Clifford kept talking about renovating his apartment, describing expensive plans for marble countertops and hardwood floors. He and Jessica were planning an elaborate wedding at some resort in Napa Valley, discussing details that sounded incredibly costly. "Don't worry about the money, Mom," he said one afternoon as he adjusted my hospital pillows. "I'm finally claiming what Dad left me. It's about time I stepped up and took responsibility for my inheritance. Dad would want me to use it wisely, to build a good life with Jessica." Every time he mentioned his father's supposed inheritance, I felt a knot form in my stomach. But I was too weak, too grateful for his attention, and too scared of another confrontation to correct his delusion. When I finally came home after 3 weeks in the hospital, that's when I started noticing things were actually missing. I shuffled out to the garage, still moving slowly from the surgery, expecting to see my vintage car collection in their usual spots. The garage was completely empty. "Clifford," I called weakly. "Where are my cars?" He appeared quickly, looking concerned. "Oh, Mom, I moved them to a secure storage facility while you were in the hospital. I didn't want them sitting here unprotected. You know how valuable they are. Dad's collection deserves better security." I nodded, too tired to argue, but something felt wrong. Later, I went to get the spare key to my beach house from the kitchen drawer where I always kept it. The key wasn't there. "The beach house key is missing," I told Clifford that evening. "I'm having the house deep cleaned," he explained smoothly. "Professional service, the works. I didn't want you going back there to breathe all those chemicals while you're still recovering from major surgery." The cleaning crew has the keys, they'll be done in a few days. Again, it sounded reasonable. Again, something felt wrong. But I was so weak, so dependent on him for everything, that I pushed down my suspicions. The first real warning came 2 weeks later, when my neighbor Mr. Leon called. "Angelina," he said, his voice gentle but confused. "I'm so sorry about the beach house. I hope you got a good price for your father-in-law's place." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, Mr. Leon?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Oh honey, I thought you knew. It sold last month. There was a big moving truck there for 3 days, clearing everything out. Clifford was there supervising the whole thing. He told me and Martha that it was finally time to sell his inheritance from his father." The phone slipped from my trembling hands. While I had been fighting for my life, while I had been unconscious and helpless, my son had sold my beach house. The house I had saved 20 years to buy. The house I had renovated with my own hands. The house that represented everything I had built from nothing. And he thought it had belonged to his dead father. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with terrible possibilities. At 3 in the morning, I finally gave up trying to rest and started making phone calls. First, I called my banker. "Mrs. Baz," he said carefully, "I was wondering when you'd call. Your son handled several large transactions while you were hospitalized. He said you'd approved everything, that he was finally liquidating his father's estate." My heart sank further with every word. Next, I called my lawyer, then my assistant Vera at Wilson Coastal. Piece by piece, like putting together a horrifying puzzle, the truth emerged. While I had been fighting for my life in that hospital bed, unconscious and helpless, Clifford had forged additional power of attorney documents and systematically sold my assets he genuinely believed were his inheritance from a father who had died broke 40 years ago. The numbers hit me like physical blows. The beach house, sold for $2.3 million. My vintage car collection, liquidated for $890,000. Total theft, $3.19 million. Everything I had worked decades to build, gone in a matter of weeks. But here's where Clifford's assumptions made him sloppy, and ultimately sealed his fate. He had used Wilson Coastal Properties to handle both sales. My own company, the real estate agency I had built from nothing, was the very tool he had used to steal from me. When I called Vera the next morning, she was mortified. "Angelina, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "Clifford came in with all the paperwork. He said these were his father's assets, that he was finally ready to liquidate. He told me you'd been managing them for him all these years as the executor, but that you were too sick to handle the transactions yourself. The documents looked completely legitimate." She paused, then added quietly, "He seemed so proud, Angelina. He kept saying it was time to step up and handle his inheritance like his father would have wanted." I spent the next month methodically building my case like the businesswoman I had always been. I obtained security footage from the hospital showing me unconscious and intubated during the exact times when the documents were supposedly signed. I gathered medical records proving I was mentally incompetent during the entire period in question, unable to make any legal decisions. But most importantly, I had something Clifford hadn't counted on. 40 years of meticulous financial records. Every purchase, every investment, every transaction was documented. I had proof that every single asset he had stolen was purchased with my money, built with my work, earned with my sweat and sacrifice. The beach house mortgage applications from 2005 with my name and signature. The car purchase receipts showing my bank account numbers. Insurance policies, tax records, maintenance receipts, everything traced back to me, not to Franklin, who had died penniless. As I sat in my home office, surrounded by boxes of evidence, I realized I had enough documentation to destroy my son legally. But the emotional devastation was almost unbearable. This wasn't just theft. This was betrayal by the person I loved most in the world. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks into my investigation, Jessica called me, and I could hear tears in her voice. "Angelina, I need to talk to someone," she whispered. "Clifford's been acting so strange lately, and I found some things that are really bothering me. Can we meet somewhere private?" I agreed immediately. If Jessica had discovered something that troubled her about the man she was planning to marry, I needed to know what it was. Little did I know that she was about to hand me the most damning evidence of all. Jessica met me at a coffee shop 2 days later. She looked terrified, pale, red-eyed, hands shaking as she clutched her purse. "I think Clifford might have done something terrible," she whispered. "I've been struggling with this for weeks, but I can't keep it to myself anymore." She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. "I recorded this without his knowledge. He was talking to his friend Marcus, and I had a feeling something was wrong. I'm so sorry, Angelina." She pressed play, and my son's voice filled the space between us. What I heard made my blood run cold. "Finally got what was rightfully mine," Clifford said, voice full of satisfaction. "My dad left my mom all this stuff to manage for me, but she never wanted to let it go. Well, while she was out cold in that hospital, I took care of business. Beach house, car collection, everything. She can't control my inheritance anymore." His friend asked about gambling debts. Clifford laughed, a sound that made me sick. "All paid off, plus enough left over for the wedding, new car, everything Jessica wants. My mom always acted like I'd never amount to anything. Guess dear old dad had more faith in me than she did." Jessica was crying as I listened. "I loved him, Angelina. But when I heard this, he was so proud of taking your things while you were dying, and he genuinely believes they belonged to him." I held her hand. "Sweetheart, those assets never belonged to his father. Franklin died with nothing but medical bills. Everything Clifford stole. I built it. Every car, every brick of that beach house, that was my life's work." Jessica's eyes widened in horror. "His father didn't leave him anything?" "Nothing. He stole from the very person who had given him everything." Before I continue with how I use this recording to destroy Clifford's world, subscribe, because what happens next shows how a mother's love can become the most devastating justice. If someone you loved stole millions while convincing themselves they were the victim, could you forgive them? Tell me in the comments. Jessica whispered, "What are you going to do with this recording?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Give my son exactly what he deserves." Clifford's 35th birthday was approaching, and he'd planned the party of the century at the Ritz-Carlton. 200 guests, live jazz band, 5-course dinner, over $50,000, all paid for with my stolen money he believed was his birthright. "Mom, you absolutely have to come," he insisted during a visit. "This is going to be the best party I've ever thrown. I can finally afford to do things right, thanks to Dad's inheritance. I'm going to show everyone what the Baez family is really capable of." His voice became emotional. "I want to make a speech about family, about how grateful I am for everything Dad left me, about how his legacy is finally being honored." The irony was suffocating. He was planning to honor his father with money stolen from his father's widow. I forced a smile. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I want you in the front row," he continued. "This party is as much for you as it is for me." I made a request that would seal his fate. "Could I say a few words about you during the speeches? I'd love to share some thoughts about the son I raised." His face lit up. "That would be perfect. You can tell everyone how proud Dad would be of me, how I'm finally living up to his legacy." I nodded slowly. "I have quite a lot to say about your father's legacy, and about the man you've become." Behind the scenes, Jessica helped me plan the presentation that would destroy everything Clifford thought he'd built. She'd broken up with him but agreed to attend to avoid suspicion. My lawyers were standing by. The district attorney's office had reviewed the case and agreed to coordinate Clifford's arrest. Plainclothes officers would be positioned throughout the ballroom. As the party date approached, Clifford called daily with updates. "This is going to be the night that changes everything for me." He had no idea how right he was. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it. The ballroom was packed with 200 guests at elegant tables under crystal chandeliers. Clifford looked handsome in his expensive Armani tuxedo, paid for with my stolen money. He was beaming with pride. When it came time for speeches, he walked to the podium with tears forming. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about the two most important people in my life. My mother, Angelina Baez, has been the keeper of my father's legacy for 30 years. Tonight, I want to honor both of them." The applause was warm. People smiled at me encouragingly, having no idea what was about to happen. And now, Clifford continued, "I'd like my mother to say a few words about our family and the legacy we're celebrating tonight." I walked slowly to the podium, hands trembling with anticipation. "Thank you, Clifford. I want to tell everyone about the legacy you think you've inherited." I clicked to the first slide. Franklin in his hospital bed 3 days before he died, gaunt and surrounded by medical equipment. The audience shifted uncomfortably. "This is your father, Franklin Albert, 3 days before brain cancer took his life. We had lost everything, our savings, our home, our future. When Franklin died, we had nothing but debt." Clifford's smile froze. This wasn't the tribute he expected. Next slide. Security footage showing me unconscious and intubated. This is from 3 months ago, the day my son forged documents and stole assets he believed his father had left him. The room went silent. Clifford's face transformed from confusion to horror. "But here's the truth, Clifford. Your father never owned a beach house or vintage cars. Your father died broke." Click. Purchase receipts in my name. Click. Bank records showing my investments. Click. Photos of me renovating the beach house alone. $3.19 million. That's what you stole while I was unconscious, believing it was inheritance from a father who left you nothing but love. The audience stared in stunned silence as the devastating truth sank in. "But the most devastating part," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "You used Wilson Coastal Properties to steal from me, Clifford. You used my own company, the one I built from nothing, to sell my assets. You told my employees you were claiming your father's inheritance." I clicked to the next slide showing Wilson Coastal sales records with Clifford's forged signatures. "But your father's only inheritance was debt." Then I played Jessica's recording. Clifford's own voice filled the ballroom. "Finally got what was rightfully mine. My dad left my mom all this stuff to manage for me. Well, while she was out cold, I took care of business. She can't control my inheritance anymore." The audience listened in horrified silence as he bragged about paying gambling debts and mocking me for controlling his assets. Jessica stood up from her table, tears streaming down her face. "That's why I returned the ring, Clifford. When I learned you'd stolen from your mother while she was fighting for her life, I knew I couldn't marry you. Your father left you nothing but love. Your mother built you a future, and you stole it." I gave the signal. Plainclothes officers moved toward the podium. "Clifford Baez, you're under arrest for elder fraud, forgery, and grand theft." Handcuffs clicked shut as 200 guests watched in stunned silence. 6 months later, Clifford was sentenced to 4 years in prison with possibility of parole after 2. Full restitution of $3.94 million. His reputation destroyed, relationship over, freedom gone. Standing in that courtroom, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heartbroken. But I also felt the same strength that had built my empire from nothing. If you want to see what happened to Clifford in prison, and whether we reconciled, subscribe. This story isn't over. Do you think I was too harsh? Or did he get what he deserved? Tell me in the comments. For 30 years, I'd let my son believe his father left him wealth, when the truth was his father left him something more valuable, a mother who'd sacrifice everything. But he threw away love for money and lost both. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals come wrapped in lies we tell ourselves about what we deserve.